Video recordings of this podcast can be found on raisingequity.org and Truth to Power on YouTube.
I initially wanted to do a series of interviews on heterosexism and homophobia because my oldest son came home and he was talking about all the hateful things that he's been hearing at school, on video games, and just comments about people being anti-gay, being homophobic, basically. I was clear what was expected in our house, that that's not going to fly, that we don't judge people because of their sexual orientation, that there are too many people in our family that we love, in our lives that we love, that are on the spectrum, that that's just not okay. So he was clear that he was not allowed to participate, but he was left wondering, what do I do? What do I say? And so I had a conversation with him about, things he could say in response. And then we had a larger conversation about where homophobia comes from, heterosexism, basically, the system of heteronormativity, that it's to be a man and a woman together, and that's the way and that's the norm. And so I wanted to make clear to him that it wasn't just like he was expected to be kind to people, but that there is a system set up that privileges him as he now identifies as heterosexual, and that he needed to be mindful of that and the power that he has, and the way the system has denigrated people who identify as LGBTQ. So all that to say, here I am, a cishet woman, cisgendered, in that I present as the gender that I identify with and that people perceive me as, and heterosexual. And do I know what I'm talking about? Am I missing something? So I said, well, why don't I think about the people that I know in my life, trust, and get their perspective, people who do identify and who have the lived experience. And so here we are today. And today I'm joined by Alexis Templeton. And I really appreciate you for joining me. And I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So you've heard some of that story, but just in general, when you hear that, what did I miss? What do you think about my approach? What would you tell me to do different or better?
That's a good question. What would I tell you to do different or better? I don't think I would tell you to do anything different or better, because it's you. Every parents don't always go about those conversations right, but I think that always trying to be as explicit as possible with kids is super important. And getting to the point. Running around we should say things just straight getting to the point with kids, because they understand it. And they're able to implement it differently than I think we are as adults, because we're socialized, we're more ingrained into our socialization than they are. And so I think being explicit is able to shift that a little bit, immediately.
I think there are times where he feels like, oh, Mom, you're so sensitive. Because he knows there's certain words we don't say, and not just around sexual orientation, but just in general. I have rules around that language matters, and that we don't use certain terms. And even, within our household, there are some people who are more okay with certain terms than I am. And so what would you say? Was I being too hard to say, this is not okay, we don't do this? I felt like to leave any gray room would be to allow for the heteronormativity to have more space. And I want to make sure that he's clear. But I don't know, is that coming on too harsh, or do I not need to worry about that? Because that's people's humanity.
I feel okay. I have two sides of the coin. So on one end, it's he's a kid, and to push him to have to stand up in those moments all the time can be mad uncomfortable. And it's uncomfortable for us as adults, don't get me wrong, but as a kid, it's a different level of bravery, especially when at that time everything your peers got going on is super important to you, So that's a lot of pressure to take on, especially in a social setting with peers. But on the other end, I think that even if the child doesn't say anything in that moment, I think at some point you will, because you hear it so much at home that that's not what we say, and you're also explaining why it's not okay to say it, and then connecting it to people they may know in real life and be like, oh, okay, so I wouldn't say that around so-and-so. When you're in that social setting and something happens, at some point you are that ain't necessarily it. You know, even if it's like not like, hey, like chill the F out, or like getting like upright wrong with people, you know, or like confrontational rather. But definitely just like on some like, that's at home, that's not what we say, or my mom said this. And I think those are the important moments. And I think that can happen whether he's like, you're being too sensitive or not. Like he still hears you. And so I don't think you did anything wrong, and I don't think you're being too harsh, because I think it sits. And I think it brews with kids, and it shows in different ways, and it comes out in different ways. So I think what you're doing is important.
I mean, I sure do try, but I feel like I'm fighting so many battles, right?
yeah.
Like he's like, oh, my mom, that he said at school, people are like, your mom's too health conscious. Your mom's, right? Because they know what he brings in his lunch or what he doesn't. So there's like all this scrutiny on my parenting from these middle schoolers.
He getting blamed.
I'm holding all the blame. And, but I just don't want him. I would much rather, not that I would let him bring whatever crap just in his lunch all the time, but I'd much rather make concessions there than like let him think it's okay to make fun of people for who they are, for just the essence of who they are. So, I mean, let's back up a little bit if you don't mind sharing. How do you identify?
So I identify as a gender nonconforming person. I'm masculine presenting. So some people would put me under trans masculine, which I'm not necessarily against. Like being put in that label. But I don't identify as trans masculine. I go by they, them pronouns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just reading the other day that people were saying that if someone identifies as a gender, to not put trans in front of the gender.
Oh,
right?
No point.
Right.
Yeah, I think yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that in some contexts we do need to put trans in front of things, especially when we're talking about the amount of trans women being murdered and how that's different from cis women. I think those descriptors are important, but to just like, I don't think we always have to say someone is trans when we're also recognizing that a woman, like a trans woman, is a woman. So it's okay to call them a woman, and we should, and that's what we should normalize.
I imagine is there a dance that has to be done? Because I feel like you don't want to make someone's sexual orientation or gender identity all of who they are, right? Like you don't want to assume that is what they want to lead with or essential. But like you said, there are times when we're talking about disparities, it needs to be highlighted.
Absolutely.
But how do you do that dance even within yourself of like, am I leading with this? How do I want to lead with it? When do I want to?
I think it's always about, I think holding myself accountable is by calling somebody else. Or if not calling somebody else, I look on Twitter. I look through threads, and I think threads teach you a lot. Like I live by Twitter threads when it comes to talking about gender, when it comes to talking about race and sexuality, sexual assault. Like I live by those threads versus like what I'm going to read when I go to class. And I'd rather reference threads in papers. But yes, Twitter will like really let you know what is not okay and what is, without having to call somebody or feeling like you're putting the burden on a trans person to answer these questions for you. Just like how we don't want to put the burden on Black people to answer our questions about racism. And so I definitely just say use the internet because you can. And the search feature on Twitter is phenomenal. So,
yeah. Well, and you know, you're so right, because in academia we're behind.
So behind.
We're so behind.
So behind.
And people who are living, like, we seek to understand the experience of people, but by the time we think to seek to understand, then we collect the data, we analyze it, we write it up, we submit it for publication, it's published. It's like 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So yes, I completely agree with that. I think I go to class sometimes and I'm just like, we don't say this term anymore. Specifically, like I'm in
give me an example.
So I'm in an anthropology class right now, and I'm also in the Africana study class right now. But on Twitter, a long time ago, I learned that like the theory behind why primitive is why we don't use the word primitive. But I'm in the anthropology class with this old cis white woman anthropologist who uses primitive in her language. And in anthropology, the discipline, that makes sense, right? And then I'm in Africana studies and they're like, bro, that shit's racist, or that's racist. And so like, but I learned that from Twitter first. But like, I think that's how, I think Twitter will catch you up, and then you get into the classroom and it's like, oh yeah, we don't do it that way anymore.
We're decades ahead.
That's offensive now.
Or third world.
Yes. Third world is in anthropology too. That's another terrible phrase to
Yeah.
use.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about your gender identity, your sexual orientation, but like what other part of your identities intersect to influence how you present in the world and how you want people to understand you?
I think I've gotten to a point where I realize people are gonna identify me how they want to.
Mm.
And so I really struggle with even using they them pronouns because I get so exhausted like explaining to people or rather people like feeling it gets awkward because people say the wrong pronoun and then it's like they don't know how to really correct it or what to do because they're kind of being offensive, but they don't know how to handle it. And so then it's just awkward. And I don't like that. That's exhausting when it's like I'm comfortable in myself to know that like I just don't feel like a man or a woman. And so you gonna call me whatever you want, and that's cool. I think I like really don't like being called he, him. I think that kind of bothers me. But in some moments I understand why it happens and I'm just like, whatever. So I say all that to say is just like I think that like I think we're socialized into genders anyway. And because we haven't unlearned that, I'm already socialized into a gender. I'm already socialized into certain categories. And so I just kind of take all of them on and it just is what it is because the world unfortunately has made up my identities and who I am. And I don't know. I feel like I can do something different rather than being like trying to change it or shift it rather than just take it on and be like, well, okay, this is how I identify. This is how I know this is how you see things because this is
Mhm.
how we're socialized to be. And it's just kind of whatever. So I kind of just at like a very like, I don't even want to say a stalemate, but just like at peace with it a little. To like not always be like they them pronouns and it's okay to say they and they can be used in singular versus versus like that's annoying. I don't want to do that with you all the time. That's exhausting. And so I'd rather just like know for myself. I know what's going on with me and
Mhm.
I get that we ain't there yet in the world for you to know. And so I'm good. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I guess I want us to catch up and be there
Oh,
for
that'd
you.
be fantastic. That'd be phenomenal. It'd be mad. It'd be super comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And just thinking about like what I need to do as a parent and what we need to do as adults who are cultivating kids to have an equity mindset to be able to be that.
Yeah.
I do. I think a lot about that. And so I've been trying to think, okay, how do I point out homophobia, it seems to come up a lot, but like how do I point out the system, the heterosexism, the heteronormativity? That sometimes is harder because like a fish in water, you don't know you're wet, right? It's just around us so much. So do you have any examples of where you were like, ooh, that's the system.
I think connecting like everyday moments to systems is can be super important. So my example would be when kids go to school and say stuff like that's so gay. And then you see Trump like you see that now transgender folks are banned from being in the military. And I think that's a way of connecting how the individual things we say have such a big impact in ways we don't even really know, we aren't even really conscious of. And that's how you connect it to the system. And then you can like kids are smart. Like I think we downplay kids' intelligence. And so showing news articles and being like, well, because you heard this is so gay, that comes from homophobia and homophobia comes from heterosexism and heterosexism is displayed all throughout the world and because we're homophobic we're also queerphobic also queerphobic is under there and transphobic and here's how transphobia shows up in the system and I think that like like obviously you have to like take your time and explain that to kids but I think that they can get it and they can make those connections and be like okay I see why it's bad. I think you might still be doing a lot, but I also see why it's bad.
Mhm.
And so I think that's impactful. And I think that's making a step. Like I just think it is. I think that's good enough with kids. Um, yes.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's sometimes you want to be doing more and pushing
Oh
faster. And I mean, I know at one point you were even thinking military.
yeah, I was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how did that ruling, the recent shift in policy, did it change your thinking?
No, it didn't. Because I'm
Really?
rebellious automatically. And so I'm gonna go in and be whoever I'm gonna be anyway. And like if you don't like it, fuck you. Like I don't know. It just is what it is. But I follow folks on Twitter who are trans and who are in the military, and so to watch their reactions of how that impacts them and how that makes them feel, And being like, we care about veterans, but we don't care about the trans veterans. You know what I'm saying? And how do you know how many trans folks have came before us, have gotten Purple Hearts that we just don't know? And like, that's real as hell. Like, so not really thinking about how it impacts me, because I see it along, I don't really see it as, it wouldn't be transphobia for me. I wouldn't experience it in the way that a trans person is going to experience it. Like, I would experience homophobia. And so it's not really my place to say. It's just fucked up. And it's scary because you think about, okay, well, if they're not rocking with trans folks, what's it gonna mean to be queer in the military? But it's just like, I think about that when I want to go out of the country. Like, what's it gonna be like to be queer in Africa, to be specific, in any part of Africa that I travel to? What is it gonna be like to be queer? Traveling to Paris, even being Black and queer, like, what is that gonna be like? And so I already think about those things wherever I go. And so to see that happen with the military is just like, it's just another place. And it sucks. And like, but it's not like harmful or anything anymore. It's just like, okay, bruh, like, now I gotta figure out how to survive here. And that's trash. I gotta think about it before I get there. Before I commit myself, I have to think about this extra step that other people don't have to think about. And that's shitty. And for what? Like, it's really not bothering you, or it's really not messing up nothing you got going on. And I'm gonna look better in the uniform than everybody else. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right. So it's impacted how you move through the world. It sounds like that homophobia has kept you. Have you been to the motherland, to the continent?
No, I won't go.
You won't?
No, I won't.
You're assuming that you won't.
I'm assuming that I won't. I have not gone. That's what I'm saying. And I haven't gone because I read stories about corrective rape. And how they chase down lesbians and they rape them.
Which country?
I don't know. I don't know. And I think that it was framed how we frame Africa, and not thinking about Africa as a continent with countries, and just framing it as Africa. So there's also that mixed in there. So I don't
anti-blackness about just saying all Black people are hateful.
All Black people
on
in
the
Africa.
Continent.
Everybody in Africa is doing this. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so that impacts it a lot too. So I have to own that. But also, it's a lot of research on where I got to go to figure out if they have corrective rape cases there. What if none have been reported? Like, that's uncomfortable to think about. And then to want to know that, like, I wouldn't want to travel alone, so I would probably have my lady or whomever. You know what I'm saying? And like, what type of situation and danger is that going to put them in? And that's a lot. So now I'm good. I'll be in America where I know y'all racist, I know y'all homophobic, but I know the laws well enough to know how I can maneuver around that. Yeah, that makes me think about James Baldwin. He got locked up in Paris.
Did he?
He got locked up in Paris for stealing bed sheets from a hotel. They locked people up for that in his time for that. So he went to jail for that, and he wrote about it when he got out, and he was thinking about thinking through like how he would rather be in jail at home in shitty America, because at least there he knows. I know to the extent of what people are gonna go and what I'm gonna face, but here I don't know nothing.
So he was in Paris.
And
yes. He was in a relationship with another man, and so they arrested under the guise of stealing bed sheets, or
under the guy. Somebody took a bed sheet and he got blamed for it. He ended up getting arrested for it. That's how I remember the story.
But he was probably targeted because he was gay.
Yes. Not even. I don't know. I don't even know. He doesn't write like that. James Baldwin doesn't write like that. No, James Baldwin doesn't write like that at all. James Baldwin is really interesting in talking about homosexuality and homophobia.
So it's not clear how he identified?
No, he's gay.
I thought so. Okay.
James Baldwin is gay.
I just want to make sure I wasn't wrong in my history.
But he's very strategic in how he talks about being gay, and how I think about it, and similar in how we will understand is how we look at how DeRay strategically talked about being gay.
Interesting.
And as a survival tactic,
right.
As like
calculated,
as wanting to be as establishing yourself as a leader. As establishing yourself as a leader, or trying to establish yourself as a leader, and what your sexuality means around that, especially as a Black man. So, like, I see it like that. And I see that's James Baldwin wanted to be as politically active, like in Black liberation movements, especially around the time of like Black Power is starting to kick off, because he got into it with Eldridge Cleaver. And like, when you think about those folks that argued with James Baldwin or did not like James Baldwin, and Cornel West talks about it in an interview. It's on YouTube. But basically, like, nobody ever thinks to say, well, James Baldwin was saying all tight stuff. Like, we love James Baldwin. but y'all didn't rock with James Baldwin because James Baldwin was gay. And so like we don't really get the intersection of what it was like for James Baldwin to be gay and also be this prominent writer. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He doesn't talk about that. And I don't think he was able to see it at that time because we just didn't have the language for real then. We just knew that like this the way stuff was.
And that might have been even though he was, like you said, being marginalized to some extent, that might have been the nail in the coffin to totally erase him.
Yeah.
If he were to be so out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even one book that he was coming out with that he's talking about homosexuality in it, he was like greatly advised not to put it out. He put it out anyway. I can't think of the book, but he put it out anyway. And he was like, whatever. If it's gonna do whatever to my career, then it's gonna do whatever to my career. And he put it out anyway. And so I think he has his moments, you know, where he's like, I'm going against the homophobia, but I also think he had a lot of internalized homophobia too.
And that actually is a perfect segue. Not like it's a great thing, but a segue to talk about internalized homophobia, which I would say is kind of like appropriated. You pick up the negative messages and ideas about what it means to be gay. How has that showed up for you?
I think it really impacts how I move through the world when I'm in a relationship. Because I think that like, because people like I identify as a dyke, and a dyke is the kind of the historical definition for the term is like a masculine centered woman. That's who you call a butch or a dyke. And so I think that folks have reclaimed that, especially black folks, black masculine centered women have reclaimed that to be like, I'm a dyke. But
there was a time when it wasn't claimed, and
that was a derogatory term.
That's what I thought. Okay,
Yeah,
so just for folks who might not understand, like there was a time when it was reclaimed in the sense that it was used to hurt and harm.
Exactly, and so it's also just it's how we think about how folks how black folks have reclaimed nigga, as in we can say it and y'all can't, and so folks have reclaimed dyke in that way. And so I think that like I'm masculine, and so people expect me to do certain things because I'm masculine. Or it's just assumed like dudes, like people on Twitter be like, you want to be a man, dykes want to be men so bad. Nah, when they when you help and move and put the lamp down and pick up the dresser or something like that, and it's like, so now I feel like I gotta be strong enough to pick up this dresser. and then because I take that on myself, I expect that of other masculine centered women, and so I think that's how I internalize homophobia as well too. That's one way I internalize homophobia and gender roles and everything. I take on all that in my relationship, and I think that's internalized homophobia. It's in our internalized heteronormativity. If that's like, you know what I'm saying? Like that's just what we're ingrained to do. And so I think that's how it shows up a lot when I'm in relationships. And I have to check that. How I go work through it is I just check it, and I'm like, do I like doing this? And is this if it's an okay gender role that I like doing, then I'm gonna do it. But is it just something that I feel like I'm forced to do? And I think that's how I check myself.
Like, are these expectations that society has of me that I want to pick up?
Yes.
Or no, I want to put that down.
Do I have to do it? Do I have to pick up these expectations? Because that's when people look at me, that's what's expected of me or assumed of me. And I think there's a difference there. So I think it shows internalized homophobia shows up for me in that way. And also I think that I have internalized homophobia when it comes to talk about like when you're thinking about sex and penetration. I think there's internalized homophobia there. And that's about power and it's about control and but yeah, it shows up there too, for sure.
I appreciate you being honest. Yeah.
Always.
There's like layers of it.
Oh, so many layers. So many layers. Growing up, like I think I've always been queer. So I'll start there. I think I've always been queer. But what I used to say stuff like, people would like say, you sure you're not gay? And I'd be like, I'm straighter than a pencil. I go take your boyfriend and give him back right now. Like, like I think that's how it's internalized homophobia has been around me for a while.
When did you have an awareness?
Awareness of homophobia?
Awareness that you identify as queer.
Oh shit, 2nd grade. Listen.
Yeah.
So I got my braids to the back. I looked like, people told me I looked like Lil Zane, and I was geeked about it. And so then one day I was on the playground with these girls. It was like 4 of them lined up, sitting down, and I flashed them to show them my 6-pack. And they were like, you a girl, you're not supposed to do that. And like, I think in that moment I was like, damn, wait, but I like y'all.
Right.
I mean, like that. And I had a girlfriend in 4th grade that I never told nobody about. So I had a girlfriend in 4th grade. She used to sing to me on the phone. It was nice. But yeah, I think I knew I was queer for a long time, but I didn't want to like actually like own it. Just because the way my family was and how I was talked to about being queer, because I was always a tomboy. So I always want to wear like boy clothes, and I didn't like doing my hair. Even though I love brushing my hair and taking care of it now, which is a dramatic difference. But when I had long hair, I hated it. I didn't like shirts that were like frilly and stuff like that. It would like like drastically like change my mood. And so because of the way my family tried to like force me into femininity and take me away from masculinity or anything that looked like I was deviating towards like women or being sexually attracted to women. And so yeah, I think that impacted how long it took me to be like, yo, like I like girls and I want to cut my hair off, and I don't want to shop in this section of the store no more because I don't like the way the pants fit. So I'm gonna go over here.
Right. How old were you when you finally had the
19
presence of self to say
19. I got bold enough to go outside and scream through a megaphone, and I was like, you need to accept me for who I am and my humanity, yelling at the police. And I'm like, finally talking to myself. I'm like, damn, dude, you need to listen to yourself. And one day, I left class early and I went and cut my hair off. And yep, I've been rocking. I've been living the best dyke life ever since. So, yep.
I'm happy for you. I've seen you grow in your sense of self.
Yes, you have.
Just to live your best life.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Any advice that you'd give your younger self?
Yeah. Come out. Tell Shorty you like her. Them letters you writing down in your journal. Yeah, call her and tell her that. For sure. I think had I been, I had a cousin who was queer, who I just lived vicariously through. She was older than me, but she was always queer. She always messed with girls, and she would call me and tell me about all these experiences. I'm like, oh, that sounds tight as hell. Like, and I'm like she knew, I don't know, whatever. And so, I would just tell people to be themselves. Like when you feel something is different or you want to do something different, like don't listen to that and do it. Like for real. I tell people if you want to cut your hair off when you was little, tell your mama you want to cut your hair off. Like go get a lining. I think I sat around with long hair for so long, cried getting my hair done. And then like when my mama could have just cut my hair off, and she says it now. She was like, I wish I would have just cut your hair off earlier so you would take care of it. Yeah, I wish you would let me too. Like I wish you would let me be myself younger. And so I know that's hard because you have parents who like tell you they want you to grow up. They want you to do what's best for you. And like being queer is not what parents see as best for some of their kids. And so like I say go against that, and that's hard, but I say do it anyway.
And what about those parents? How could they best support kids, your younger you? What did you want your mom to do? What did you want the adults in your life to do to support you in being who you are?
I didn't even need a conversation. I didn't need there to be me telling you who I am. I just needed like when we go to the store, you don't tell me that like you have to get all these girl things and you can get like one thing that you want, which would be from the boy section. Like you see what's going on. You know, I would say pay attention. Them your kids, pay attention. Like it's there. And when they start to do things differently that's outside of like our gender norms and what's normal, let them come to you with questions and be able to ask you and do your research so you know how to answer them, you know? And I think what happens is people they don't want to see that happening, and so they just ignore it. They don't want to see that like something different is happening with your child. They're something's going on, like, and you should talk to them, because it wasn't just that like I was just more masculine and I wanted to play basketball. It was little things. My mood, like I would cry about putting on girl, like that means something. And what does that mean? It's not that I don't want to get dressed. It's not that I'm like I'm making us run late on purpose because I'm being a child. It's because I got anxiety about putting these clothes on. Well, talk to me about why that is versus like I'm getting in trouble because I'm not ready to go. And so like I ask parents to pay attention, be patient, and to do research, and kind of like you have to normalize it within yourself in order for you to normalize it with your kids. Like if it ain't normal for you, it definitely ain't gonna be normal for you when you talk to your kids. So you have to like do that work to make it normal. And that's by reading, and that's by watching shows. And that's by like, even if it's uncomfortable and it's different, it's like, oh, like people just really live like these, like people, this is how people live. Got it. Cool. And then you talk to your kids about that and it's easier. And so, yeah, I just tell parents to like, most importantly, be accepting because they're your kids.
Yeah, but we're only that easy. Yeah, right.
No, it's definitely not that easy, but I think like that's
but it is in the essence of it, right?
Because it's really that simple.
It is that simple, and people want to know.
Not.
Yeah, what do I do? What do I do? And it sounds like, I mean, you've given us a lot of advice around what you could say around homophobia and point out the links between homophobia, heteronormativity, and heterosexism. But when it comes to accepting and loving people, it's not about doing a whole bunch of stuff.
No,
it's just simply about being.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And letting them, like, I don't know, not having any control on how your child like develops from that point, because you don't know. You really learn it from them. You really become the student at that point. And I think sometimes parents may forget that too.
Yeah.
That like this person is really teaching me something. This little person is also teaching me something. And so allowing them to take the reins sometimes too is a good thing. Letting them lead you in the store where they want to go for their clothes or what they want to get and for their toys, what they're putting on their wish list for Christmas and telling Santa they want, you know? Like, I think stuff like that is important. Little things like that.
Yeah. And that's work for us as adults to do too, because we've been so socialized in this binary around gender and sexual orientation, and they're both on a spectrum. So you have given us a lot to think about and a lot to digest. And I appreciate your candor and your honesty and your willingness to talk. We could talk for so much longer.
We could talk for so much longer.
But thank you for joining me in Raising Equity.
Thank you for having me.
And you are welcome back anytime.
Thank you. Thank you.